The jobs figures that are coming out later on today, how significant do you expect those to be? I mean, the estimates that it'll hover around 5.4 or 5.5%. Is that what you expect?
It is. Look, the reason for it, Pete, is how you look at JobKeeper particularly. So those figures, those people that have been stood down, not those people that have obviously unfortunately been laid off, but those that have been stood down, under the way that the survey works and under the way that the law works, they are technically considered as still somewhat employed. So that's why there will probably be some people asking today around the employment numbers, why they seem so much better than what is clearly going on. And that is the idea that we clearly have seen an unbelievable amount of people, unfortunately, out of work. And that is clear. You also are likely to see that the changes in job creation is down by about 40,000 jobs, which is what the consensus is. That, again, is pretty conservative, considering that we know if you just add up basically the 10 headline companies that we always were talking about back in March, Virgin, Qantas, Premier Investments, all these kinds of players that we knew were offloading, 9,000, 10,000, 20,000 employees. They also don't necessarily fill into it because, again, they are on what we call stand down. So the numbers today will be different because of that. So you are likely, as you said, the unemployment expectation is for 5.5%, but let's be honest, we know that the unemployment rate is more likely around 7, probably even edging towards 9. It's a question now of, with those on stand down, do they stay stand down? Do they therefore end up in a scenario where they're actually laid off and made redundant? And that will probably be seen more likely in June, July, as we understand the full force of the coronavirus stand down and whether or not, a player like Virgin, for instance, unfortunately goes under. Those 9,500 people that are currently on stand down are clearly laid off because they obviously the company's gone under. So
underemployment, where would that be at the moment? I mean, and how would that affect things if that was included?
Yeah, so underemployment is included, and that's probably the better figure to look at today. It's a perfect question because before this all started, underemployment, so just for those out there to understand what that is, it's the unemployment rate plus those that are employed but are looking for more work. So they're obviously underemployed. It's the underutilization rate that we talk about, and that was sitting at 13.1% before the coronavirus started. Now, the expectation is that could get up to about as high as 25% off the back of this whole scenario because those that are underemployed are getting less and less work in terms of where they sit. So those that were already there or those that might have been on, casual or part-time work are probably going to find themselves in a scenario where they are actually getting less and less hours and are therefore being pushed back even further. And for that reason, that underemployment rate that you talk about, Pete, is going to be significantly higher. Again, it probably won't come in the March numbers, but you will start to see them through May and July as the full force of this comes out. Companies start reporting exactly what they've done with regards to stand downs, layoffs, etc.
But these claims, Evan, that the IMF made yesterday. So the forecasts are, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but 6.7 contraction this year, followed by a rebound of about 6.1%, which is that V that economists talk about. Is it that simple? Is that what you see happening?
No, I agree with that. It's not that simple. Look, there's a whole range of factors that come into it. I actually think the 6.7 may be a little bit overly harsh because, again, the thing that's probably not factored into those figures is government spending, and we know that's well and truly through the roof. The other part of it that also needs to be factored in is that we are still seeing pretty decent signs that exports in Australia that have big value to us, iron ore, copper, coal, have actually been on the up still, considering that China actually started to rebound at the back end of February. So there may be a few little extra bits that, help that figure. We might not be 6.7, but more along the lines of about 5. The question is consumption. 55% normally of GDP in Australia is made up by consumption. And if we saw the consumer confidence yesterday,
record lows.
On record, exactly. And business confidence the day before, new record low for that as well, just an staggering amount of to collapse. So it's very hard to forecast. The question is, what is also very hard on this is the V-shaped recovery people talk about is on the idea that we get through the 6 months or 9 months that is coronavirus, stage 1, stage 2, come back into formation very, very quickly, and we get back to sort of somewhat normal life by Christmas. And that, I think, is hard to see in terms of how it is. It's more likely to be a U-shaped recovery in terms of what happens because, yes, there will be, growth turned back on. All of a sudden, there will be those standoff people, maybe not all of them, but a fair chunk of them come back into the employment market. They then go back to trying to live a normal life. They start spending again. They start consuming. They go out to restaurants, cafes, etc. So that's where that U shape comes from, because all of a sudden something that's been just shut down completely by the fact that the government has locked down the country turns back on very, very quickly. The catch is, how quick is that word? Do we just go to stage 2? Do we go back, as I said, to pre-coronavirus? I don't think you can. And that's why it's hard to argue maybe the V shape is too fast. I think a U shape is more likely, because there'll probably be trials at stage 2, trials back at stage 1. Do we see flare-ups? Could we go back into lockdown? It's so hard to forecast, and that's why I'm very hesitant to do so.
Yeah, right. And, in the front page of the Financial Review this morning, it talks about, how the government should probably now be starting to map its exit strategy when it comes to easing restrictions, particularly around the business and retail sector. I mean, I'm sure they're doing that already. But how important is it, do you think, that kind of needs to get going to increase that confidence that's just been sapped?
Yeah, so I'm going to say this from a very point of view, because, again, people are very understandably concerned about this comment. Also from the point of view that health is still should be the most important thing. But from the economic point of view, and just purely from the economic point of view, there does need to be that roadmap. You do need to understand what it means in what September could look like, what December could look like, what March next year could look like. And the reason I say that is that part of the collapse in business confidence and part of the collapse you're likely to see at the end of this month is forward capital expenditure from business. Business at the moment is not investing. Business at the moment does not see the future. And for that reason, there is this very, very fast decline in private investment. The one part of GDP we don't normally talk about, it has been terrible for a while, but it's going to be the worst we've seen in a very, very long time. And until we understand the future roadmaps that the public sector and public health is taking, it's going to be very, very hard for business to therefore invest and therefore expect what their capital expenditure will be in 12 months' time. So that's why it's important, just purely from the economics point of view, is that if business can start to understand the roadmap out of this, then you might actually start to see investment.